Elementary School District Board of Directors meeting. Chris Murphy, I get to serve the chair. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. We have our posted agenda, so we'll jump right to agenda item number 1, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'd invite folks who would like to stand up. Folks that silence their phones and doing my principal calling, let us know. Okay, folks. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our second agenda item is public comments. Many of you look familiar from around a month ago. So if there's anything new to bring to the floor, now would be the time to do it. I would ask simply out of respect for everyone's time, unless you've had a huge change of heart for anything you may have changed last month, maybe we can progress through this. But I'll open the floor for public comments. As before, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, let us know your name and the town, and we'll sort of just go first come, first serve. So yeah, sir, please.
My name's Gary Martin. I've lived in Binghamton all my life. Just want to know who proposed for our children not to pledge allegiance to school. I've been in this town all my life, except for 8 months I spent in Vietnam. I can remember saying it in the 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. And now all of a sudden the children don't want to say it, or they said they can't say it, the teachers won't let them. We just said it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you tell me what's right and what's wrong. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Michael Gardner, Shasbury. More a couple housekeeping things.
Okay.
The SVSU website isn't really mobile friendly for pulling up agendas and meeting minutes. So I didn't know if that was something that maybe you guys could consider looking into. I know a lot of folks, many of whom are here tonight and many whom were unable to make it, expressed some difficulty, because if you don't do Google Docs, like we don't use them at work because they aren't secure enough. It's just kind of a pain. On the agenda, the revised agenda, again, my ignorance for only coming to these meetings when it seems like something's on fire. I noticed that there wasn't a review or approval of the previous meeting minutes. Didn't know if that was something that typically occurs. And the reason that I mention it is the meeting minutes from the last meeting omitted, I think, 2 really important things. One was Kelsey Leard and her husband, who, as she referred to herself as the offending teacher in question.
Kelsey Kenyon.
Kelsey Kenyon, sorry. And the reason I felt that was important is because I do feel like codified in the meeting minutes that she very specifically was told by the principal at Shasbury that she was no longer allowed to recite the pledge. And so I would really hope that the board this evening can propose to amend the minutes to include both of their comments before the minutes are approved. So those are the only 2 housekeeping things I had. I'm sure we'll have a chance for conversation when we get to agenda item 9, or is that just going to be a board-led discussion?
So that's a great point. So let me address that. So for those of you who weren't here last month, and for those of you who don't make a habit of watching these meetings, public comment is just that, it's comment. So even though this is a public meeting and meetings of the board are public meetings, they are not meetings of the public necessarily in the way that a floor meeting is, for instance. And so public comment is that it's not necessarily a time for question and answer, but the board can sort of exercise their prerogative to answer certain questions. So let me just address the piece of meeting minutes. Attached to the agenda is something called a consent agenda, which has, in this case, typically 7 categories. One of those categories is always minutes, approving the minutes from the last meeting. So board members everyone gets, once the meeting is posted, is warned rather, those minutes are posted with the agenda. Anybody who wants to can take a look at those and propose modifications to those. Typically, when it comes time to accepting the consent agenda, it's to approve everything that's listed in there to include the minutes. So it's not unusual for us to find some corrections as we go along in there. And I think that's an excellent point, to make sure that those 2 voices are heard. So yeah, so that one that addresses sort of the purpose of public comment, which is why we didn't necessarily have a back and forth just then, because it's not designed for that, but also to answer the question about how minutes are approved, because it is a standard portion of the meeting. Okay. Well, yes, ma'am. Hi.
Hi, I'm Charlene Martin, Gary's wife. He failed to say that he was a Purple Heart blown up in Vietnam. I can't believe that Shasbury School, I taught in Shasbury School for years, for Sam Carrera. We always did the pledge outside every day and inside if it was inclement. in our classrooms. Why, we've got an incoming president that calls our veterans suckers and losers. Is that how our kids are gonna learn? Why aren't they saying the pledge when our men, my brother died of Agent Orange recently because he was a long-range sniper in Vietnam, laying in that Monsanto spread crap in the bush, and it took his life all these years later. My father was on Tinian in South Pacific. My uncle was on Normandy. My grandfather served in World War One. And these little ships don't have to pledge allegiance. Why don't they have to pledge allegiance? And who doesn't want them to pledge allegiance to the United States? When our men are and women are serving and dying and coming home scarred up for the rest of their lives. I want to know that. I want to know why our kids can, but you watch, the 10 Commandments will be in every public school, in every classroom, or else there'll be no funding for those schools. That's what Donald Trump said. Now I want to know what's going on here. I really do. Why aren't you the teachers, the principals, the supervisory union having the pledge said in these schools?
So I would say that that is all what agenda item 9 is going to be about tonight. It is a continuation of that conversation.
Yeah, good.
Chris, Fran Kenny, Shasberry. It's funny, we've done the pledgers, first time I ever see the office do the pledge. And I've been on the board for well over 30 years. So my point is, are we gonna keep doing that? I know you're not gonna answer, but I'm just wondering if that's gonna be every time.
So let me just jump in if I could, Frank.
Sure.
I've been chair of this board for 8 years, and you said the pledge of allegiance at the beginning of every single board
You
meeting.
have,
On this-
okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay.
So, but I interrupted. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Except for last time, and I explained why for last. time. Yeah.
I know I guess we still do it at the town meetings, I take it? Okay, all right, that's all I got.
Norman Blank from the VFW, to speak for myself and all our members. We haven't changed our stance, so. Just remember that.
Hi, my name is Cindy Legg and I'm speaking for myself. I'm not gonna bore you with repeating that I feel we should say it. But that being said, Veterans Day was yesterday. Was there any school yesterday?
No. Well, Sacred Heart.
Did they have off yesterday?
No, they marched in, the whole school marched.
Right, oh, and that was horrific.
Yeah.
Talking about great.
Half of the school.
And I loved it. And I saw all the kids doing that. By not having them learn respect for the flag, which is a symbol of country and veterans, then someday, and I hope it never comes, but if we have a call out for help and for people to step up, we put a call out. These kids aren't gonna, as adults, they're not gonna answer that call. And the reason they're not gonna answer that call is because we instilled in them. It's not a necessity. You know, they don't need to care about that. Why should they care about something if we don't teach them to respect the flag, which is a symbol of country and veterans? Because if we don't do it, then that must mean that we don't give a damn about the flag, the country, or the veterans. That's my view.
Mrs. Green, our music teacher, I'm from Shasberry, Happy Park. Mrs. Green, our music teacher, and our art teacher, Emily Uncle, they brought chorus to BPI Friday, was it? And sang songs, with them and also made cards for the vets to thank them. So there are teachers at Shasberry who still honor them and respect them.
But not totally. That's my
No,
opinion.
you're right. You're right.
And I would also,
There are still some that do.
Just my personal.
and I would also note, just since we're on the topic, further down the agenda item, again, this is for folks who might not attend these meetings or watch these meetings often. The tail end of every agenda is an FYI, and it's basically information that's posted online for folks, for members of the public to take a look at, board members to take a look at, nothing that requires action necessarily, but just things for people to be made aware of. This month, what I asked to be included on there is the SVSU K through 12 civics and US history overview, right? To demonstrate that no school is relying solely on the Pledge of Allegiance to address these things, to address veterans issues, to address American history, to address issues of patriotism. There's curricula built around this, right? So the Pledge of Allegiance may very well be one aspect of that, but it's by no means the only aspect that's used in our schools. And I don't know that lots of folks knew that, so it's there for folks to take a look at. It's in Google Docs right now. But we'll see what we can do about making that more accessible for other folks. But I did get the sense last month that folks thought that like it was the pledge or nothing, and that's not the case. So I just wanted folks to have an opportunity to see that material as well. So yes, sir.
Joe Bizdon, from Powell, Vermont. Quick question. I have a question that I don't know if you can answer. Is Powell having any issue with the Pledge of Allegiance going on in the classes down there? Because I haven't heard anything, but I'd just like to know if anybody knew if there is any of this going on in Powell School. And number two, I agree with what everybody had said. I went personally and thanked the kids from Sacred Heart. Sorry, forgetful. Yesterday after we did the parade to let them know how I appreciated that. Because I'll tell you, it touches your heart as a veteran to see these kids out there doing this. Pretty awesome. That's all I gotta say.
Anyone else for public comment tonight? Yeah. Hi.
Sorry, Chris. I was just hoping that you could address the third point that I brought up, which was if part 9 on the agenda was going to be a board discussion or if it was going to involve public interaction.
It is a board discussion. Yeah. So thank you, Mike. So this is really the opportunity for members who are here to address any point that's listed on the agenda or anything else for that matter. I think I said this last month, but I'll say it again. One possible use of public comment is for folks to bring things to the board's attention, not that we would necessarily take action on then, but to take action on at some point in the future. So I presume you're all here for agenda item 9, but if there's anyone else who has anything to add, you can certainly do that. I'll be right with it. So when it comes time for addressing these individual points that are within the agenda, that's a board conversation. And it's made public, like we're not doing this in executive. There's nothing that is planned to happen tonight that is protected by executive session. Which is a thing in law that we have certain things that we can do behind closed doors, personnel, legal issues, things like that. But a practice about the pledge does not fall into any of those categories. So we'll go on in the open. Behind you.
I just have a question,
Please.
not a statement. When and why was the pledge stopped?
So I can tell you that I know there's some disagreement. From the board's perspective, there was not a ban. There was a modification in how it could be done.
Why? I want why.
Sure. I can appreciate that. I guess what I would say is that different parents have different points of view.
I don't care.
Okay.
If they're Jehovah's Witnesses, they used to come to the library when I was librarian. That's fine. Or they could sit. We didn't force them to say the pledge.
Good.
But every other child said the pledge.
Okay.
Now, this is ridiculous. This is really ridiculous. And I'm so frustrated after we went through what we just went through and that idiot calling our men and women suckers and losers. Now we've got our children growing up and this is what's going to happen to them. When we get into if and when, and we will, because you don't teach history anymore in the classrooms, the way we learned history, history repeats itself. And if these little twits, whatever, won't learn the pledge. I don't care about curriculum. I've written curriculum. I know curriculum. That pledge should be said every day. In the curriculum, it's not every day that these children get a piece of the United States.
Right.
Or the country we live in.
Ma'am, I would 100% agree with you that anyone who refers to our veterans as fools or losers or suckers, it's shameful. Whether they're about to occupy the Oval Office or not, it's shameful. And I'm with you 100% on that. I would ask that we refrain from calling our little kids twits and shits. I would ask that we not do that, please.
It's not their fault. I should call the teachers and the principals and the head supervisor.
So what I think we can do is have a conversation without calling anybody any names.
Well,
I think we can do.
Let me tell you something.
I can tell you.
You said the pledge.
Mhm.
But yet our children can't say the pledge. My little niece is at Sacred Heart School, 3rd grade. They say the pledge. They're a private school though, you see.
So I'm breaking my own rule by engaging, but I would just say this final thing. It's my understanding that the pledge has been said every single day at Shaftesbury. It's been said every single day. It's my understanding.
I don't know. I'm not in Shakespeare anymore. Thank God.
So anyone else for public comment before we move on? Ms. Clark?
I'd like to speak to the gentleman who asked about Pownell. Now, This is my understanding. I am a Shasbury student or teacher, been there for 29 years. I have said the Pledge of Allegiance with my students for 29 years, every single morning, up until October 2nd, when I was told I was not allowed to say it anymore. And so I was also told that it's the principal's decision. So every principal has a decision to make over their school. So some principals allow it, some principals do not. Our principal made a decision on October 2nd to decide that I am not allowed to say the Pledge of Allegiance in my class during school hours anymore. And he was told by the superintendent and the lawyer, this is my understanding, that he does have that power, and he took that power and he made that decision. So Shasbury teachers and students have been meeting at 7:55 a.m. before school hours outside of the flagpole saying Pledge of Allegiance. We are not allowed to say it with our class between 8 and 3:30 at the school. So that's what we're doing in Shasbury. That's what's happened.
And the purpose of, sorry, and the purpose of agenda item number 9 is to make one consistent practice across all the 6 SVUESD schools. Yeah, to eliminate some of what you're describing. Yeah, yeah. So anyone else for anything for public comments? Yes, ma'am. Hi.
First of all, thank you. I realize that you have a difficult dilemma trying to keep everybody, happy per se or anything. And I haven't changed my opinion from the last meeting. I agree with, what was said here. I still think that there are times that we do underestimate our youth, and we need to not do that, but that's my personal opinion. But I just, yesterday was Veterans Day. And I can appreciate the fact that not everybody is going to agree, and that people are going to have different opinions, and that you as a board have to find a way to accommodate those. But our veterans are the ones who went out and fought, who sacrificed. Some of them paid the ultimate price, and they're the reason that those people get to disagree. And that's okay. If you disagree with me, that's okay. But I really honestly believe that out of the respect, we should say the Pledge of Allegiance, and you should find another accommodation. And I don't know what your policy is. You probably already have it decided before the board, just a little discussion. But I think for them to be told they're not allowed to do that during school hours because that's what their employer is saying, their principal. I just don't agree with that. And I think it's wrong. So thank you.
Let me just make sure that people have had a first try. Hi.
Yeah, I would just ask, we're talking about K to 6th, 5th grade,
Mhm.
right, with elementary, but I wonder what's going on at the middle school and high school. And if the issue is in a broader or it's just interesting to me that this is just a younger kid discussion, or this is for young adults, or middle school and high schoolers. So I think that that needs to be included somewhere in the conversation.
Yeah, so part of what and again, this is just clarifying what agenda 9 is going to be about. Agenda item 9 is going to be about. Part of what we need to decide as a board is whether or not we are going to be content in setting practice for our own schools, or whether or not we want to make a recommendation to the policy committee, which will then address all the schools in the SVSU. So that's one of the things that needs to come tonight.
I just have a question that I think.
I'm doing a terrible job not answering questions. So you might get lucky. You might get lucky. Who knows?
No, I'm just wondering, is there going to be a vote on that? And there should be, because it involves the community and every board. I'm on a board too. Every board is for serving the town or city and the communities. And the community should have a say of decisions. So I believe that it should be a vote, and hopefully that will be the case. Because anyone who doesn't want to say it, that's fine. But don't implement some law for 2% that the 98% that want their children to grow up the same way they did. Saying it in class, starting out the day, didn't hurt me. I think I'm all right. You guys look all right. I'm sure all of you said it. So,
So
be put to a vote.
So in terms of the practice, there's no function for board practice or votes taken by the board to be made to become a public vote. I suppose folks could generate whatever sort of petition they want to put something on the ballot come town meeting day, the way you initiative forms. But in terms of the structure of the board, there's not a function for that. Most of us, a few of us here are appointed, most of us were voted in, and that's sort of the mechanism by which folks can have their desires.
When she's talking to this girl right here, we support the schools. Why can't we have a vote? We pay taxes.
Mhm.
Why can't we have a vote?
Because I think in the same reason why you pay taxes for anything else and you elect.
No, we pay a lot for school taxes.
Sure. But you elect legislators to create policy and law for the state. You elect board members to create policy and practice for schools.
Well, somebody.
You elect select board members to create policy for the town, right? So that's how the representative government works.
Clark.
So, isn't that right, Claire? That's right. Isn't that right, Mary? Mary's here. Mary's hiding back there. We know. We all know. So yeah, like
I'm sorry, I just, kind of more technical questions, not being able to open the consent agenda. Is there a conflict of interest statement on the consent agenda for board members?
no. So there's a conflict of interest policy that exists for the SVSU.
And that would give a board member that potentially has a conflict of interest in tonight's discussion, the opportunity to recuse themselves?
So board members have an opportunity to recuse themselves for any particular reason on any matter. The conflict of interest policy specifically speaks to board members not being able to incur income from something that the board may decide upon.
Okay.
You can't run a bus company like Glenn used to, for instance, and have Glenn vote to, have his buses, for instance. Yeah, that's an example.
And I guess the second part of that, it's been a long time since I was on the school board, certainly a period of time before we had a regional school board. Are board members still required to sign off on the Vermont Board of Ethics school board policies?
It's been a long time since I started working on a board, so I don't remember. You are sworn in, but I really don't know if that's what you're talking. I don't know. Well, last of our more recently,
I mean, that was an oath. If that's what you're talking about. I mean, I think I'm the most recent and
you and Stephanie, I think, yeah.
But
It's a pretty lengthy policy and I think it does a really good job differentiating your hat as a potential parent or taxpayer versus the hat that you have to wear in the fiduciary obligations that you have as members of this board. So I just thought I would ask the question, but if it is included as part of the oath that you guys have sworn in with, then I'm sure that it weighs heavily on everyone that sits behind that desk right now.
I would expect.
Thank
I
you.
would expect. Anything else, folks, for public comment before we move on? Would someone, Norm, would you mind please just checking to see if anyone in the other room has anything to say? And Superintendent Colkeen, anyone online? There's no one with their hand up. Okay, I should have said, for anyone who's participating online, if you would like to make public comment, there's a few different features on your Zoom link.
they're all set.
Thank you very much for checking. One last call for anyone online? Okay, thanks, folks. So moving on to the consent agenda. So the consent agenda had a few different items. One were the minutes for October 8th. Our minute taker, Richard, sent out some corrected minutes. So hopefully folks got a chance to look at those. There were no warrants, no leaves of absence. We have 2 retirements to announce. Principal Donna Cawley, which we'll be hearing more about in a bit, and Susan Green, music teacher from Shaftesbury Elementary. We have a resignation of the Molly Stark nurse. So they have 2 nominations, for a Molly Stark crossing guard and then a first grade teacher, Molly Stark. With regard to the minutes, I would say there's one other correction to be made. Page 1, line 38, Chris McGuire was not here last month, but Chris Murphy sure was. And I think that was a reference to me. So we can ask Richard to make that change. I'm going to, Mike, I'm going to ask you one more time, please. So, and I know you were the teacher. If you can just remind me of your name, please.
Kelsey Kenyon.
Thank you. And Mike, you would name one other person who made comments.
Leonard Kenyon.
Thank you. So I would entertain a motion now to correct page 1, line 38, as I just described, and also to ask Richard to go back and be sure to document the public comment made by Kelsey Kenyon and Leonard Kenyon. Before we get to that, say any further recommended modifications or corrections to be made in the minutes? Hearing none. Sandy, I just heard you make that motion. Do we have a second on it? Thank you, Glenn. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as just described with those corrections to the minutes, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I should have asked, Superintendent Colkeen, do we have any board members participating online?
No, you do not.
Thank you. So great. So that is our consent agenda. That brings us to item number 4, which is finance. The treasurer's report was posted. It was earlier today. So I would entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report as posted, please.
So moved.
Thanks, Glenn. Do we have a second on that? Saw Stephanie on the peripherals. We'll call Glenn and Stephanie. Any discussion on accepting the finance report as posted? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the finance report as posted, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Okay, agenda item number 5, which is the potential reopening of the administrator's contract. So the administrator's contract is due to be renegotiated next year. But there are a few things that are happening. One, it seems, that we still have some ways to go potentially in establishing parity between the compensation package for our administrators and some of their contemporaries nearby. There's still some work to be done, but it seems like there's an argument that could be made in that case. What the negotiating committees for both the paraprofessional support staff and the teaching staff did this year was to really offer a pretty generous bump for those folks as well. Again, to bring them into parity with a lot of their contemporaries nearby. So myself and Stephanie Peters, who's the head of the MAU board, met with representatives from the administrators union.
We should clarify that to principals and vice principals. It's not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, not central. Yes.
So Stephanie Mulligan, the.
Yes, Stephanie Peters is somebody else entirely. Thank you. That's right. That's right. Hi, Stephanie. Stephanie Mulligan. Sorry about that. Yes, for the principals and assistant principals. We heard what those folks had to say, and we figured we would take it back to our boards to see what people wanted to do. So really the question right now is not do we want to give a pay increase, but do we want to open up the contract for renegotiation 1 year earlier than we would typically do? That's really the question that's on the floor right now.
When would that contract open again?
Sometime next year, Superintendent
They're in year 2 of a 3-year contract, so we would open this time next year.
naturally, like without
Naturally.
Right. It would just come due. So we can have discussion if a motion is made. So if anyone is in favor of reopening the administrator's contract, we have a motion, then we can have a
I should say
conversation.
that it was a request from the Principals Association to do that.
It was, right.
So we have to answer them one way or the other. It
Mhm.
wasn't a.
I'll make the motion to open it.
Okay, I'll second. Thanks, Lou. First and a second. Now we can have some conversation about that. So this is, and maybe I should have said this earlier, but we would do it the exact same way that we do negotiation for our other contracts. There'd be representatives from this board, representatives from the MAU board, who would meet with them and hash it out. And maybe there's some give and take, maybe there's just give. There's probably not only going to be take, but you never know how these go.
So this is open for principals, vice principals.
It's a,
Yep. And it naturally occur next year at this time, so we're looking to open it 6 months early, probably.
I think 6 or 8, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Usually by September of the last year, the contract be open.
And the rationale, the reasoning for starting early?
I think I'm going to paraphrase, and there may be nuances that I'm not capturing. I think the notion was, one, let's have parity within the district, in consideration with what the sports staff got, what the teaching staff got, and also let's have parity in the region and bring our principals and vice principals up to a general equality in terms of compensation with some of their contemporaries, some of their colleagues in other districts.
Ask an institutional history question.
Do my best to answer.
Since I'm the youngest here, right, in terms of serving. You know, as we look to fill positions, like how much of a trouble has recruitment been in years past?
It's my understanding, and
Principal position, we had less than 5 applicants and maybe 3 that were certified and qualified for the position.
what I understand from our HR director, we will not be the only district looking to fill some principal positions. So I do think, from that perspective, it couldn't hurt. We have seen, doesn't matter how long you've been in the community, you've seen the effects of really great principals, you've seen the effects of not so great principals, and I think it's really important that we get as good principals as we can in our schools. So we have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion?
This is just to open negotiation with them. Anything that may be agreed has to come back for a final vote.
That's right.
of the board.
Yeah, just like every other contract that we negotiate, it needs to come back to be approved by this board, by the MAU board.
So it could even drag out past.
I mean, potentially, if I could personally see it, that if it seemed to be taking a really long time, we would just say, forget it, and we'll pick this up when we typically would. But I don't know. It's possible, Joe.
Guess it's in line, you can open it, doesn't have to agree with anything.
That's right.
Then
It's, do we want to have the conversation? That's really all.
always table and
Yep.
close it and come back next year.
Yeah, I don't think it costs us anything other than a bit of time to have the conversation.
So how many members are in that negotiation committee?
So it's my only,
Is it one per board?
It's one per board. It's a smaller bargaining unit.
yeah, is the director of Southwest Tech
No.
a principal? So that's not a part of it.
They're off, they're not part of that bargaining.
Okay.
unit. Yes.
And with this point, Arlington as
Different bargaining unit also.
no different bargaining, okay, so
Yeah.
just the local.
And the SU board is involved in it because the SU does not employ any principals.
Any further discussion on this? So all those in favor of reopening the administrator contract and the manner we've just described, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Great, motion carries. So, if within the next week, please, if anyone wishes to volunteer for that duty, just shoot me an email, please, and let me know. And then, in a week's time, I'll
We
figure out.
won't know until the MAU board meets and takes the same vote.
Yep. But we'll get the ball running and we'll keep moving it. Yeah, so let me know if you would please, if you want to serve in that capacity, and we'll put two or one or two.
Question, when do we think this was,
Sorry?
when do you think it would open? Just because I know we have a bunch of members who had be up for,
Oh, for reelection. Yeah. I don't know if.
we have 1, 2, 3, I think we have
We would-
4 or 5 of us that are going to get for reelection.
Considering when the MAU board meeting is, that they would have to take a vote. So that brings it right up before Thanksgiving, so it wouldn't be until December at the earliest that
Okay, so
the
we should
group could
make
meet.
it to March, then sure. At least have discussions.
As the chair said, we would hope it would be a quick process one way or the other.
Okay, so that's agenda 5. So agenda item 6, policies. We have 2 policies to warn. Policy 1090, which is the use of school facilities, and policy 5156. Both these are draft policies in their presented form, student nutrition and wellness. So we'll take them one at a time. 1090, there's a lot of work in the beginning, sort of clearing out which districts it applies to. It's one of those old policies that we haven't looked at a bit that goes down and names all the individual words that don't exist anymore. Then it does go into more substantive changes about how our buildings are to be used. So all we're doing at this point is warning it for further consideration. There's a lot here, so I'd recommend that folks really take a look at it before we come back to this point. But right now, I would understand a motion to warn draft policy 1090, please. Thanks, Glenn. I hear a second. Jeff, any discussion about warning draft policy 1090? Very good. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we have warned draft policy 1090, and then draft policy 5156. Student nutrition and wellness. This is simpler. There are fewer changes to this, so it won't take you quite as long to look at it. But I would entertain a motion to warn draft policy 5156. So moved. It's fun. We have a second on that?
Second.
Paul Ricardo, I saw his hand first, so we have a first and a second. Any discussion on warning draft policy 5156? You ready?
One question. I know we talked about the thing in Woodford with gym class on Friday, because they were, seemed like they'd get once a week versus twice a week. Not sure if that was addressed in this policy yet.
It was not.
No, I was gonna ask about that because I haven't heard an update. I know Laura was looking into that and I don't know if that was looked into or not.
I don't know, Sandy, would you like to, as the rep to the policy committee, you want to speak to that? There's
It
anything spoken
did
to.
not come up at our meeting. It was not a part of the meeting. There were other pieces of that policy that did get addressed, but that is not one. And part of it stemmed from the fact that we thought the superintendent's
looking into that, and that could be correct or incorrect. I'm not sure, but that's the reason why it didn't come back at us at the policy.
And I guess the one question is, just thinking outside the box, if Woodford's doing 2 classes in the same day, it's still 2 classes per week.
I
Is
wonder-
that the catch-all?
I'm not sure I'm sure that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's how it is.
And I would say this policy really, even though it's called the nutrition and wellness policy, it's really about what kids are eating and drinking. It's really about that. It's not so much about PE or other forms of exercise throughout the day.
But make reference to it in it.
A little bit, yeah. I think that the point is well fully addressed elsewhere in the policy, yeah. Okay, any other discussion about draft policy 5156? This is what you all missed last month. It's kind of fun stuff. Yep. Okay, so hearing none, all those in favor of warning draft policy 5156, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay. So, agenda item number 7, principal's report. So, Superintendent Culkeen, you want to introduce our principal before she addresses?
As you know, that every month we have a different principal come and give a report of updates, of what's going on in their school. This month, we have the principal of Monument Elementary School, Principal Donna Colley, who some of you know made a monumental decision. So that Principal Colley.
Done.
Done.
Thank you. I did share, I think, most of you have my letter. I did share a letter with Superintendent Culkeen. It is in the packet, kind of within those documents. So hopefully everyone can find it if they're interested in reading it. I just want to reiterate a few things before my last probably presentation with this board. I did share that I am deeply fortunate to serve under the leadership as superintendent and to collaborate with exceptional team of administrators, directors, central office personnel, educators, and support staff, each of whom shares a tireless commitment to fostering and nurturing and enriching an environment for our students. Their dedication has been both inspiring and instrumental in their collective success. So I think it's really important to share that I've had many, many years in this district. I've loved them all. I love our children. And it's each person that really helps to support everything that goes on for our children in our schools. I also shared a letter with our families. Don't look at me. Our family members here. I did want to say we are off to a fantastic start at Monument. No surprise whatsoever. We have an amazing staff there. I feel like we didn't even have a summer break. We just picked up right where we were. Seeing the energy and dedication and excitement from our students and staff as we embrace new learning opportunities and build a supportive community is always inspiring. And that's what brought me back every year. This is my 41st year in education, and I'm incredibly proud of that and for the work that I've done to support children. And I'm also very excited because I know there'll be a new leader that will come in with to Monument. And that's why I'm announcing early, because I want that community to pick the person that's right for them and to then continue to inspire what goes on there. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for the last 8 years. It's been great having you as chair. As the Bennington School District Chair and now the SVUESD, repeat after me, board. So thank you very much. You've done a fabulous job and I've appreciated your work. Board members, some of you are new. This gives me an opportunity to now address you. So some of you are very new. I don't know you. You're clearly new to this board, but I've worked with many of the board members. One that's missing here, who I actually was a colleague with, and she was a paraprofessional. So my history goes back in many different ways and many different positions. So dear board members, as I prepare to retire as principal of Monument Elementary and move into my next professional opportunity, I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to serve alongside the many dedicated individuals across the SVSU. It has been a privilege to work within the supervisory union to support the education of our young people and foster a culture of growth and inclusion for every learner. As board members, your role is essential in shaping the direction of our district, ensuring that each child, regardless of background, ability, or circumstance, is given the tools and opportunity to succeed. In this role, you are uniquely positioned to advocate for all learners across the district. This responsibility requires a constant commitment to equity and a reflective approach to decision-making. Supporting all learners means consistently examining our educational beliefs and practices, prioritizing broad and inclusive policies over individual or personal interests, and ensuring that our actions always align with the best student outcomes. As you move forward, I encourage the board to reflect on each decision's impact on the entire student body rather than a select few. This approach not only fosters a more equitable environment, but it also reinforces our mission to support the diverse needs of all of our learners. By championing a vision that serves every student's potential, you affirm our collective commitment to a community where all students can thrive, succeed, and feel valued. I appreciate your dedication to the district and wish you all continued success in leading with compassion, integrity, and an unwavering focus on our students' needs. With very warm regards, Donna Colley, Principal, Monument Elementary School, until June 30th, 2025. Thank you.
So we first met, I was a parent, and it's been a
As a
long,
parent,
been a long
yes.
time since I've had elementary school kids, but whether it was as a parent or as a board member, never once was I ever concerned or had any doubt at all about the culture they were walking into, the education they'd receive, the love and the care that they would receive when they were in those doors at Monuments. And we know that was flows from the top.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Very much.
Anyone have any questions for the principal? Nope.
No questions. Just kidding.
Moving on to agenda item 8, the SVSU report. So I'd open the floor to any of our reps to update us about the goings on of the supervisories.
Yeah, so we were focused in the beginning on the fact that we are losing our superintendent and assistant superintendent and trying to figure out what's next. How do we do the search? How will we go forward? And it was determined that we would move the consultant to a nationwide search for our superintendent. And that is with the BSBA, the Vermont School Boards Association, as the consultant. And hopefully they will do a great job in getting us ready for next year. We also focused on policy 2600, which is the superintendent's evaluation. Glenn and I had worked on that over the summer, and it went into the agenda for November. And so we started our review and have started talking about what needs to be in it. We need to tie that in to go into, before we hire a superintendent, we need to have that in place. So we need to work on that quite quickly, and hopefully we can get that done.
And I think afterwards, like the focus was superintendent, then as we find a superintendent to look for the assistant superintendent.
And sometimes you'll find that maybe there'll be applicants that might work out, maybe not.
Yeah.
That is summary.
Bulk of it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Any questions for our SVU reps?
Have we been the young and rare, have we worked with VSBA on national searches in the past?
No. No,
I was in my MSU where I work on one. They are, it's kind of considered best practice.
Yeah.
You bring in a consultant. They guide you through, steps you may be looking at, you might not be looking at. And it's ultimately, a correct hand holding for boards.
I hope that they can reach a distance. Last time we went locally
Yeah.
and although we did get a lot of different applications, we didn't use national big search like this.
Any other questions? Great. Moving on. All right. Discussion of the Pledge of Allegiance. So just so folks know that somebody mentioned something along these lines, earlier during public comment. Boards, it's illegal for board members to even have group conversations outside of open meeting law. So emails, for instance, I may send 7 of the same email, but I'm only ever sending it to one person. And so we never create quorum, even accidentally through emails, because it's all done one at a time. So I certainly did send out the foundation from which I hope we can build our conversation today to folks. So folks, whether they had a chance to read it or not, they have each got my initial thoughts on this. But I have no idea really how this conversation is going to go. So certainly nothing has been decided upon yet. What I would like to read in again as a starting point for our conversation tonight. And I structured it as a resolution. That may be more formal than we need, but my purpose in structuring it as a resolution is to really draw in some of the governing documents that already exist for the SVUESD, and then to speak to some of the values that I think are reflected in the SVSU as a whole, but also values that have been discussed by this board over time, and then it ends in a proposed policy. So what I'd like to do is to read this into the record and then go from there. Yes, and
Not policy though, please. Don't
practice. Yes, thank you. If anyone hears me referring to this as policy, please just understand that I'm speaking and this is a practice. Policy has a very specific legal meaning and a very specific process by which it goes to be approved. And as I said before, determining whether or not we want to send this to the policy committee is part of what our conversation has to be tonight. So if I say policy, just know, unless I'm talking about the policy committee, know that I'm just misspeaking. And don't be afraid to call me out for it. Okay, so this is what I'd like to read in as a starting point, and we'll go. So, whereas the SVSU ESD mission statement includes the charge to, quote, develop a culture of inspiration and engagement in which staff, students, families, and the broader community are positively involved in education. That's the citation for that is the SVU ESD Student Handbook for 24-25. And whereas the SVU ESD mission statement includes the charge to, quote, develop and foster a culture within the SVU education community in which behavior and communication are driven by the values of respect, honesty, commitment, and openness. Again, the same citation. And whereas educational attendance by children between the ages of 6 to 16 is mandated by Vermont statute, and that's Title 16 Vermont statutes annotated subsection 1121. And different draft. And whereas this board recognizes the reflective, civic, and patriotic benefits to a communal recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance within our schools. And whereas this board recognizes that there are various valid reasons, such as religious, political, historical, and personal reasons, why a parent may not want their child to participate in a group recitation of the pledge. And whereas the schools of the SVU ESD should avoid, to the greatest extent possible, practices that regularly and predictably exclude students, it is hereby resolved that the schools of the SVU ESD shall abide by the following practice. Shortly before the beginning of class, and I'm going to put an asterisk in there to explain why I'm using that phrase. Shortly before the beginning of class, the school principal or their designee will lead students and staff in a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance at some common area on school grounds. 2, participation in this recitation is voluntary for all. 3, all students and staff members, whether or not they participate in the recitation of the pledge, are to be in their appropriate spaces within the school buildings by the start of class. And 4, principals will notify school families of the exact time and place that the pledge will occur and should keep these consistent throughout the school year to the greatest extent possible. So I use that phrase beginning of class, and several board members asked me about that. That's taken from the handbook. It's beginning of class is a term that's defined by when students need to have high knees and seats, and it's different for many of our schools. It's not consistent throughout each of the schools. So just a few statements about that as a foundation. In some ways, it's kept purposefully vague, in terms, so for instance, one board member suggested that we be more specific in terms of when it takes place. Schools are different sizes, they have different, size student bodies, different staffing needs, who knows where these things will be said. So I didn't necessarily want to say like it has to be 5 minutes before the bell or 10 minutes before the bell, because we continue to allow some flexibility for principals to make those kind of decisions, logistic decisions that we probably don't know as they can make better judgments on those than we can in terms of the logistics of how this would be put into place. Beginning of class, I already spoke to. And ultimately the notion is this, right? There are a number of folks who have come forward. I'm sure members of this board have been contacted by people who I haven't been contacted by, but received phone calls and emails and texts and stopped in the grocery store to say that yes, the pledge should be provided, but it shouldn't be mandatory. And we need to figure out a way that kids don't feel excluded from things that happen inside their schools. So, I mean, in the best of all sort of negotiation around these kind of things, I don't think everyone always gets everything that they want, but I think this is a just compromise. In that it doesn't ban it, and in fact, I think more students across the SVUESD will be saying the Pledge of Allegiance on a daily basis once we make this. If we adopt this practice, more students across our district will be saying the pledge after this than they do right now. It makes it a school-wide event for those students whose parents want them to participate. It doesn't use up instructional time. And it doesn't create a situation where a student has to like self-select out. Right? Students need to choose to do this thing or go to their classroom. And I would much rather put the weight of navigating this kind of thing on the adults than I do ever want to put it on little kids. So I think that accomplishes all of those points, and I would open it up to comment by the board, by any board member. Any board member.
This would be prior to school hours, so they would have to be there early before the start of school.
Yeah, so the way that I'm envisioning it, like the pledge, it's like 17 seconds to say, right? So I don't think it would take a ton of time before school, but this would be before that beginning of class. Like
Right.
Woodford, it's 7:45. I was looking 7:45 in some schools, it's 8:25 in other schools, it's 8:20 in other schools. So we'll let the building staff figure out like the exact when of all that.
No, go ahead. I was gonna say, like, connecting this with Kathy's comment earlier, we're talking about something like, we're talking about after they've already been let in the building, right? This isn't like outside. Okay.
I mean, it's like
at Shasberry, doors open at 8.
Yes,
The class starts at 8:30 or so you're talking about in that half an hour window before.
Yeah, and it certainly could be outside, but just like
Yeah.
somebody else mentioned, like
If
if it's freezing outside, like principals know what they're doing. They're not gonna like.
But just in that
Yeah,
half an hour window.
yeah, that's what I'm envisioning through this.
What did you envision? Okay. What did you envision your selection process for, like how they decide who's going there? So the parent potentially makes that decision, or the child, and is it a day-to-day decision, or is it like a parent makes a decision and the teachers have to uphold that every day? I'm kind of curious.
That's an excellent question.
Sorry.
I mean, I had not considered that sort of minutia. One board member suggested that it'd be the kind of thing that parents opt out of at the beginning of the school year. In the same way, like you sign a media release, you would sign, I want my student to, I don't want my student to. I would think that like any decision a parent makes at the beginning of the school year, you can change your mind. That's fine.
But how much is going to be parent versus child?
That's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
You know, because if your best buddy's going down and doing the pledge, then you would have to go with them.
And is it a
Yeah.
day sort of
No,
decision, or
but
is it a standing?
there's that chance that you might not want to.
Yep.
I mean, is it student driven or is it, because when you start looking at state laws and how some laws say parents have to sign permission slip not to stay in.
Yeah.
But other places say it's kid's choice.
Yeah.
So.
And piggybacking on that, there are only 4 states that don't have any requirements at all about the pledge, Vermont being one of them.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a Montpelier discussion
Yep.
as much as it is ours.
There's some states in Vermont that haven't said it in 15 plus years.
How many
So
states
schools-
are on subject, Joe? How many states are there?
Some schools in.
That's.
I
expected you to be.
So the pledge is promise. It's a promise to the loyalty of our flag and that we are going to remember all the goodness that we have in our country. It is, we're reciting it to remember, all of that loyalty to our country. And so for me, I don't have an issue with that 30 seconds or 15 or whatever it is of a teacher leading that in a classroom and a child saying, it's I'm going to step aside, or a parent saying, I'm going to step aside, because it's 15 seconds. I mean, you could easily go out and get a drink of water and come back and not be noticed. And I think kids are so tolerant of one another. I don't see it as something that they would hold against a child. You would know better. You have kids at school.
Well, I kind of pulled both of them, and one's 9 and one's 14, and neither of them could tell me what kids in their class say it and don't say it. So at Whitford, they say it all together, but a lot of schools, it's recited over the intercom system, has been kind of is what I've gathered is like, that I think as they get into the interviews in middle school, he said has done that, and they choose to stand or not, and he couldn't tell me. So I don't feel like there was anybody that he could say felt excluded or left out or singled out. I don't know if that's everybody's take, but that's kind of what I gathered from my children.
So to that point, I'm not arguing that at all. That's what you boys came away with. I think the educators, the professional educators in the room will certainly know better than this, but as someone who's worked with kids for a long time, there is, there's a huge amount of egocentrism in every kid. And your sons, my kids, when they were little, anyone's little kids might very well not realize what the other person is doing, but at the very same time, they're going to presume that all eyes are on them and everyone is going to be paying attention to what they do. And I think that's just part of being a kid, I think. And so even though the reality may very well be that no one's really paying attention to what any other kid is doing, my presumption is kids are going to feel like if they are doing something different than the group, they're going to feel it, whether or not any other kid ever realizes it or not, they're going to feel it. And is that a thing that we should be taking into account as we take a practice?
That every day when we take kids in and out of a class, services, they're in and out.
But they feel that pressure. Getting it full services, she feels excluded. She's been left in the hallway for services, but the other kids go out and do activities outside. So I mean, those kids feel,
But that's like an extended,
Yes.
this is 15
But-
seconds.
no, but still, like she's been outside in the hallway, class ends. The class went outside. She was still in the hallway waiting to be picked up. And the teacher left that person in the hallway.
Which is where I wanted to start my point in this conversation about the organizational management of holding a large group ceremony during school hours. There was talk about 5 minutes before, and then there's talk about starting at 8 o'clock. First thing is contractually, do we have the staffing available and willing to be in the building to staff a large scale recitation and the subsequent logistics of having a large group of children moving through the building, supervised, unsupervised, as opposed to the classroom-based model that's there now, or in many cases is there now, and what kind of effect that's going to have on moving around. Again, you can say, kids are going to feel left out. Kids are going to feel differently, but let's talk about the organizational management of it first. And then let the rest be driven from there.
And then I would just respond to that too, because I'm like devil's advocate. So if we have a teacher who doesn't want to say the pledge in the room, then does it occur in the room? Because if there are only one teacher in the room and no paraeducator, is that going to occur? And how much confusion does it be if there's a substitute one day who says the pledge, the next day the substitute doesn't say the pledge?
Yeah.
So there's that consistency of, if you have a consistent location where it always happens, then the kids know where to go. Versus if they go in their rooms, it's not here today, it's tomorrow.
That's a fair.
Say it.
And I can say anecdotally, from my own kiddos' perspective, you are absolutely right that at least at Shasbury where he goes, most practice would lead to more people more consistently saying the pledge, right? Because it was just a small hand, the part of, consistency in terms of just a small handful of teachers who were saying that, right? Certainly all of these conversations and the public nature to them may lead to more teachers wanting to. So that's, potentially one thing, but at least from how it was in September versus how it would be if this were enacted, I think more kiddos who wanted to say the pledge would have the opportunity to. I mean, if I can voice my own thoughts here, like I appreciate especially your leadership in the last meeting. Kind of the respectful conversation that was able to be had. I think we can have a little bit more nuance when it comes to veterans. It may come as a shock to some, especially considering what I may say that I have veterans on all sides of my family, meaning not just mine and my mother's and my father's, but my wife's, and on both sides of her family, who share our same beliefs. We talked about the BPI stuff that happened last week. My son was one of the kiddos from Shaftesbury's chorus who went last week, and I was one of the chaperones that sat there. My son walked through and shook everyone's hand and said, "Thank you for their service." And for anyone that knows my kid, that's a big deal. And something to be, from my perspective, quite proud of. My wife's grandfather, who served in World War II, is a colonel, shares my particular belief, which is, when we're talking about elementary school kiddos, they do not, and I think this message got a little lost in last meeting, and this is just my particular perspective, but I respect it being heard, don't have the cognitive capacity. This isn't about big words like allegiance or anything like that, but to swear an oath or a pledge. We all know various religions who, whether it's about, the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, who purposefully wait until the kiddo is cognitively developed. This is child psychology at its basic, to be able to understand the gravity or the abstractness of what it is they are pledging to. And I think that getting into the practice of consenting to things that one doesn't fully understand itself begins to undermine what I thought was a very powerful point from particularly a lot of the veterans in the room, but folks who were talking about what happens when, we get folks who want to be citizens here and they have to make that pledge or to join the service. I think, and this would come straight from my grandfather, my wife's grandfather, who would say, no, like, I want you to be able to say these words, understand what it means, and understand what it means to make an oath. And so just know that there are some folks with great respect for the veterans who have served our country that may have a slightly more nuanced point on this, and so we can talk more, but that's my perspective. And I think we can talk about judgment of kids and how much kids will judge. If we can take any lesson from the amount of vitriol that was in and around, especially on all online spaces, we can say that this is not necessarily a neutral field. And yes, those aren't parents that are going to be in the room making that kid feel that certain way. But I think it would be foolish to imagine that if a kiddo wanted to opt out, that there is beyond just the typical developing kid and thinks they're the center of the universe. And am I cool to do this or I'm not? But, especially when we start talking about maybe 4th or 5th grade, where they're beginning to grasp those abstract concepts and beginning to understand where they fit in those things, that's a weighted conversation that's not as neutral as I think it's being made out to. And I would make the argument, in agreement with those people whose maybe perspective is on the other side of this for me, is you would want a kiddo to fully understand the gravity of which they are doing. And I would say, and I think this is something that needs to be addressed from a curricular perspective locally, but obviously at the state perspective, is to get the emotion that's in the room, right, behind this. And then I'm a teacher as well. I teach on the college level, but then how do we break this down to an age appropriate level where kids are, where we're teaching towards this notion of oath taking in this specific place, right? Where kids are beginning to understand concepts of loyalty, what this means, so that we can break this down so that by the time they are that this is presented with them, it's something that can be full throated. So. yeah.
So that being said,
Yeah.
I appreciate where you're coming from. And from where I'm coming from, I remember a time, and some of you are old enough out there to know what I'm talking about, where you might have learned about pilgrims and I will not fill in the word, but I bet every one of you knows that word. And so over time, we have learned that certain words that may have been used or taught in school when we were younger tend to get replaced or they get shifted when you're old enough at that level. So if I understand you correctly, you believe that by sharing the pledge now, that it's developmentally inappropriate or not,
Yeah.
not at a level where you feel.
Yeah, and I recognize that it's anti of what a lot of people believe, but yeah, that's very, I mean, and for me, it's grounded in child psychology, right? There are like stages of operational development in a kid's brain.
Absolutely.
And this the notion of oath taking is an abstract exercise that even for the kids that yes understand allegiance or understand it's a little bit more advanced than your average elementary school kid.
In the same respect, where words get changed over time because times change, values change, things change, but the pledge is still, in my opinion, just a promise to respect the country and the values that we hold true.
Yeah.
And I think we'd break it down. I mean, we have three issues here, and I think when we look at it, we have the pledge issue. We have a pledge, which we're saying 17 seconds of, then we're talking, people have talked about the flag issues, like, disrespect to the flag. We have a flag code, which was signed into law by a president. It's very, this is what you do with the flag. And, I drive around Bennington, doing my job, and the worst time they see this flag that's hanging off the back of the truck, dragging on the ground. For me, my dad's like flag code, highest honor. The flag is safe, which is different than the pledge. I mean, the veterans. And I think we can all sit here and say we respect the veterans for what they do and the sacrifices they made. I mean, probably most of us have veterans in our family. So I mean, we're looking at, you pull the veterans because we're not talking about disrespecting veterans here. We're talking about what do we have to do with this pledge? It's an oath. And for what it is, an oath that we have to say. When you look at the history of the pledge, I mean, it was contested 1943, peak of World War II was the first Supreme Court Pledge of Allegiance. And they found that you don't have to say the pledge in school. You don't have to even stand up and do respect it. And my wife is a teacher, she's always said it's okay not to say the pledge because it's your right under that Supreme Court ruling from World War II. But you have to stand up. And they ruled in other states, you don't even have to stand up because it's that First Amendment right. So I mean, I think we really have to look at how do we do the pledge in school for the people who want to participate, make it consistent. Make it so if they want to participate, they have a safe place to do it. And the people that don't want to participate, they can move out their day because of that Supreme Court ruling.
And I applaud your wife for being able to share. It's okay that you don't want to, because then she's teaching tolerance for those in the classroom.
But the same thing, I remember being in school and getting slapped in the head, hat off, hand over the heart, say the pledge. That's $100,000 lawsuit now. And I mean,
Just wrong, okay, Jen, it's just wrong.
it really is. In Connecticut, a girl refused to stand. They made her stand, $100,000 lawsuit. So we have to balance.
But we're not going, that's not our
But,
intent. We're
but
not.
we have to figure out the safe place to make it occur. Because it can get there. It takes one kid saying something, they get going home. Teacher said stand for the pledge. And that's the lawsuit. And I think as a board, we have to weigh that. What are the potential lawsuits if we're not implementing this policy right? So if it's a choice of going to a place, then it's that child's choice versus a potential lawsuit. And I think we always have to weigh that in, especially in this day and age where, people sue for many reasons. Had some lawsuits here that we've had to contest. You know, so I mean, I think we have to look at, you know, where's the safe place? Is it the classroom? Is it a set location of the building? Students can go with the teachers who want to participate. And I think that's a way to kind of look at, like, how do you keep it?
So just to structure the conversation moving forward, is there any board member here who is in favor of making this mandatory for all students and staff? Okay, so that's a point that we're.
I don't know,
Well,
finish the
I
thought.
don't think we're allowed to. I don't think,
Well,
Yeah.
the law doesn't,
There's the First and the 14th
Sure.
Amendment.
Well,
Don't-
right. So,
Yeah,
but the reason why I'm saying let's structure the conversation, because I'm hearing a lot of people saying, advocating for not making it mandatory, and I don't know that anyone
Oh,
is saying
okay.
we should be making it mandatory.
Can I dovetail
Yeah,
on
please.
these two comments and this is a question for you, Sandy, but then like to all the other board members who want to. And since that's the case, like, let's start with that as a starting point. How would you, take again, like the Shasbury Elementary, like how would you, solve the consistency factor, right? Like say you had a kiddo and you were like, I want them to say the pledge every day of their elementary school existence. And the fact of how it's structured now, or at least in September, that it was, it's just a smattering of things. So how would you be happier in that, or, I mean, how does that?
well, in the same way that I want them to eat apples and vegetables. I think that it's an offering and that we are making sure that the offering is there to do this. And so that option is there to do it. So yes.
Well, I'm saying what Chris read off was this. But I'm saying if we went away from this and we're not moving towards making it mandatory, but going how it was before, you would have many grade levels potentially, again, that aren't saying the pledge. So how would we, if I take your position and say, let's put this in the classroom and let's, get as many kiddos saying it, how would you do that?
I love the fact of bringing everyone together to do it together
Okay.
during the school day, not before the school day, but during the school day, so that we logistically have the staff to manage the process.
Yeah.
I just struggle with saying to a teacher, you can never do this in your classroom. That's the piece. I mean, I love it as a full school.
Okay.
And I also love the teachers having the flexibility during circle time to share that, if that's something that they feel would enhance their community.
Can I ask a false question? Sorry.
Go ahead.
You can tell me to shut up.
No, I would say that the whole question my own. Go ahead.
I mean, what if, given this restriction, because it is, right? Like, let's not, that particular restriction, there is nothing stopping a teacher from, using that circle time to sing the 50, great United States song or America the Beautiful or any other patriotic thing that doesn't necessarily, again, not respecting the position that I'm taking, that doesn't involve this notion of oath taking, but that yet still begins to build up this notion of civics and respect for country and all that stuff.
So if I didn't have the pledge, but I had a school song,
Yeah.
and I require all the students to sing the school song, is that also affirming that school song?
What do you? Well, no, but I'm not sure if I got you right, but I'll answer this quickly and say, for me, the difference is oath taking. So if there's a school song that says, I pledge allegiance to Principal Johnson and let's roll, then that, I would have a problem with that. But if it's like Shaftesbury's amazing and, the Eagles and roar, that to me is the same as we're going to learn My Country to the Thee. We're going to learn America the Beautiful. We're going to, understand the history of this. And this is this moment, which I think is really important, of community, right? Of kiddos coming together and saying something. I mean, there's an energy there that I think is really important, right?
There's a wonderful energy during circle time.
Yeah.
And that is a chance for teachers to connect with kids day to day.
Yeah.
And to get them to focus on their learning, helps to bring them together, and it's empowering.
So I'd like to ask a question of Glenn and Sandy. You each raised different ways this question of staffing and structure. What this would look like if we went with the thing that I introduced in the beginning. if the logistics were not an issue, if we just knew it's all gonna be A-okay, what would your thoughts be about what I proposed at the beginning? If we knew that staffing and supervision was not going to be an issue.
Oh, if you ever worked in a school.
Like it first, like, is the only barrier the challenge of logistics, or are there other barriers to it as well?
Oh, I just, I'm gonna put some, do we have to say at the beginning of the day? Could we say at the end of the day before dismissal? You know, because some schools do a dismissal from cafeteria. Because they go down the cafeteria, they line up the bus in the cafeteria, dismiss from there. I mean, you know, I think we have this, you know, we always say the pledge start of the day, start of the meeting, you know, what's to say that this patriotic act, and I think that's what, you know, we're talking about here is this, the patriotic act is, you know, a teacher could, if the kids want to go say the pledge before dismissal, goes and wait in the library for dismissal, while the other teacher leads a patriotic act activity, which could be the my country to the be, you know. That's
Do you have reservations about it on when there is an intercom, that it is done over the intercom?
I have an issue with
I think it comes down.
I have an issue with little kids being singled out because they're removing themselves from a thing that everyone else is doing, as opposed to creating an event out separate from the classroom, still when everyone is there at school. It becomes a destination. Hey, we're gonna go say the pledge. It's gonna be great. We're gonna go down there. Which to me, the result is the same, but it feels like we're putting the ownership, as I said before, on the adults to make that happen, and less ownership on the kids to like make a decision. Sorry, Stephanie, let's go ahead.
I'm just wondering if the separation still feels like it's there because you're still separating the groups of people. So it's like the kids that stay behind in the classroom, if those that go, I'm just wondering if like, how does that feel different than separating them out? I'm genuinely curious
Right.
what the difference is of like if your child, you know, for instance, if your child was in the classroom and others stood and your child didn't, and your child feels left out, do you feel that your child would feel the same way being left out if a group of children left to say it somewhere else and he was behind or she was left behind?
I think this is where I think consistency of messaging is gonna help everybody out, because I think starting with, if this happened in our particular school in the 8 to 8:30, and you were aware of when that's happening and how that's happening, again, the adults in the room, especially with younger kiddos, can help protect that. And as they get older, can have conversations around that. So yeah, I'm fine. But I would also say that, to your concerns, I would want to leave it, I would want to give the principals as much, because I can only imagine the organizational nightmare that this is. And I think it's going to be real different for each campus. I would want to leave some room for them to be creative in the way, you know, so that it doesn't, so that they could create a moment in the day that's in their particular day that feels as strong as possible. And I think for one school that may be at a different time. But I mean, for me, you're on your way out, but I would get the principals together I would want to like listen to their respect on position on that. Cause I can imagine that, you know, Shaftesbury's opening half hours, maybe from a staffing perspective, like really different than Monuments. And so just.
And Stephanie, to answer your question from my perspective, the reason why I propose it happen before the beginning of that school day is that it would remove that part of like kids getting up and leaving the classroom, because kids have been in their classroom. They're arriving to school, they're going to the cafeteria, like when they're going to that central location where they know the pledge is going to be said, then they head to the classroom. And the kids whose families want them to opt out, they go directly to the classroom.
So if I opt out and my teacher's opting in, I'm going to an empty classroom?
Well, then you're not going to the classroom. That's part of the logistics that need to be worked out.
We're also assuming that the population of the school is going to show up at a certain time.
Yes.
We're going to assume that they're getting there at 7:55.
For whatever.
Well, I'm asking.
Sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, and from what I gather, this is really important to some parents, right? And so if it's that important, my guess is that that's in order to support this thing that is so important to a lot of folks, they will make that adjustment to arrive that 7 minutes early. Like,
That's harsh.
And my,
it's, well,
It's
it
also
might,
like
That's hard.
contractual point
Yeah.
of who's staffing it. And
Sure.
it's not just the 7 minutes before, it's 10 minutes before, because there are gonna be those people getting there quite early, especially that this is, you know, a hot button topic, for lack of a better term. You're gonna need to staff this, and you're gonna need to staff it well.
right. And so when the building's open, so Shaftesbury I heard opens at 8. I don't know that,
Yeah.
but we'll go with that. No, the day starts, I think, 8:25 at Shaftesbury, I think. So there's 25 minutes, like that school is not a bunch of kids running wild, like there are already adults who are in the school.
Understood and
Right.
heard,
Yeah.
but my kid gets there at 8:24 and with an expectation of saying the pledge that day.
Say when you're late to a thing, you don't always get to do the thing.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
Do buses get there early enough consistently to accommodate
would.
that extra timing?
I mean, as long as it's not like, hey, at 8 o'clock, as soon as the door opens.
No, I'm just curious.
Right, yeah,
Like,
then,
how
yeah, but it wouldn't. It
Consistently
wouldn't.
early.
It wouldn't.
I mean, from my perspective, I think hopefully it would be on us to kind of set the tone and then the individual, but like to take the temperature down and make this less of an antagonistic, you know, like we're forcing principals to do it in this way. This is where like giving them as much leeway as possible
Mhm.
so that it doesn't feel like, you know, again, like 7:55 in the morning that folks have to get here 10, you know, I mean, and that adjust, I mean, again, I'm a parent, that adjusts an entire schedule, but like maybe not the 8:24, right? Maybe that's like, but I think that could, you know, I think if there were support behind this, I could imagine that would be a conversation that a principal might welcome to have with his community of saying like, look, this is what we're doing, right? But like, how do we do this in a way that brings as many people in? And that's going to look real different on at each school.
And I think, Sandy, just to your point about it being harsh potentially, any change that we institute as a result of this is going to be a change and it's going to be adjustment, but I also feel pretty confident that this time next year, it's going to be nothing. And it's going to be how the way the school's operating.
Perhaps.
And I'll say that responding to the, you know, the great majority of concerns, right? On this side, back to the point, I think this will have more kiddos more consistently saying the pledge
Do you have a sense of how it's working at Shaftesbury currently?
in terms of
Is
the
it-
750. I mean, we can't talk to the audience, but
I'm just curious if it
Yeah.
was being utilized or if you had a sense of, you know, if there's a majority of people being utilize it.
yeah, I mean, that's a conversation. I mean, I didn't know the timing of it. That's a conversation for them. I imagine that right now, 7:55 is probably not the most convenient time for that to happen. But the way that this is worded, hopefully opens that up to be more of a welcoming conversation for, but yeah, that's not, I can't speak to,
I was just curious.
yeah.
I mean, but I believe the teachers contracted 7.5 hour day, so, you know, we'd have to look at that different,
Yeah.
but, you know, if that's 7.5 hour day, that's 8 till 3:30. So all the teachers should be in buildings
Yeah.
at that time.
Yep.
If they're not, then we have
There's
a
a difference between the start of the school day and the beginning of
Yes,
class.
and I think the start of school, if I remember from Shaftesbury, starts at 8:30, I could be wrong, and ends at 2:55.
Finish your pickup requester,
Yeah.
yeah. Then you 3 o'clock.
I mean, I think so, basically, like, you know, it depends, because kids who take the bus, they get picked up earlier now. It used to be
3
late.
o'clock.
It used to be 3 o'clock.
They get there by
It's switched.
8:25.
So the
The
people,
picker-uppers
the
are
picker-ups are
2:55.
2:55 or buses are later.
Picker-uppers.
So we already,
I'm a professional.
so we already have this kind of, you know, some kids are later anyways, and they're in school longer. Some kids are in the classroom by themselves. I mean, it's like I said, it goes back to, you know, we know the buses are the bus is gonna be the issue. If the bus is running late, you might miss out in the morning. We know in the afternoon it's going to be 3:05, whatever the buses show up, 3:10. That's the set time. You know, they're not gonna come up and get there. So maybe it's look at the end of the day. And we have to, you know, adjust that schedule 1 minute each direction.
That's really tough, if I remember correctly, and it's been a while since I've been in a classroom. Sometimes when you have younger kids and it's wintertime, you're bundling them up, and that's a whole nother level of.
That's harder at the younger grades than it is at, yeah.
Kids at the end of the day.
I'm gonna explain this, you know, we're not using the word policy, but our policies are vague. Or more general, and then the administrative regs get written to
Yep.
that. Practice should be similar, like a more, as you propose, more broader encompassing. If you do vote this tonight, then it falls on the principals to make it work in their buildings.
Like, if I do share with you, I gotta do it for everybody. Yeah.
I know it's not open to public comment.
And we,
Yeah, so we're gonna keep it with the board. Okay, thanks.
That's fair.
So,
I've heard a lot of I think statements
Yep.
tonight,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna share my I think.
Okay.
I think we're getting away from an American tradition, and I think it's a mistake.
make me share the anecdote. I told you I didn't want to share the anecdote.
Can't not say it.
So Jeff alluded to it earlier. So, yeah, so people have talked about.
I'll counter that. Devil's advocate, because somebody has to devil's advocate here. We have the statement of law. You know, the 47 states that have law require the pledge, require some form of patriotic act in California. You know, they made it very clear. You do this to serve the day. We don't have that. So I mean, you know, when we say, you know, it's tradition, but it's not law. And I think, you know, and I mean, if I go to Texas, it's law.
Let me put this out there.
Texas says, I'm saying the pledge every day unless my parents on it don't, they know how to say it.
So this was the one-on-one email that Glenn and I had today that I said I wasn't gonna share. But I'll share it with you, board member. You're the only one listening? No. So it's just between us though. So Jeff, you alluded to it earlier. So the Pledge of Allegiance only became the daily in-school practice that we all grew up with in the 1940s. It was adopted here and there. It was written in the 1860s or something, but it became the practice, which means if you're my age, your grandparents didn't say it in school. And I would be pretty upset if anybody started to claim that the World War II generation were not among the most patriotic generation that we've seen in our lifetimes. So the whole notion that the pledge has to be said, or else you're not patriotic, doesn't hold a bit of water. And if you're of a certain age older than me, maybe it's your parents who haven't even said it. So whereas I can certainly appreciate that we grew up with it, probably everyone in this room grew up with it, I don't know how much of a tradition it is. I think the tradition is patriotism. The tradition is love of country. The tradition is being willing to go out there and devote your time and your energies to make this place a better place for everyone who lives in it. And part of what I'm trying to do with what I propose is to do exactly that in a way that don't have kids feel bad or excluded because their parents have decided they don't. Because really, I truly think this is a thing that's, whether your kids are gung-ho or whether your kids don't say it, it comes from home. It always comes from home. And so, and I think we should be giving an opportunity to continue in that, we'll call it custom, that American custom that we all grew up of saying the pledge day to day, without making kids feel less than their classmates because their folks don't want them to do it.
And I mean,
That's what I think it comes.
and it said, but,
This is Clark.
behind.
Oh,
Right, right. I mean, she said it, she said Jehovah's kids would leave the classroom and go to the library,
They didn't have to, they could either stand or leave the class,
or they could sit.
or they could sit.
Yeah, and but I mean, but still, you know, it depends how powerful that is, but some Jehovah's families request that the kids exclude themselves from the activity.
And I don't want to create a situation where a kid has to like sit down while everyone else is standing up, where it has to make that decision between what their teacher wants them to do and what their parents want them to do.
Or take off their hats, they wear
So-
policies now.
So I don't want to, as much as I appreciate the folks in the audience, I don't want to bring them into this conversation because this is a board conversation. So if we are, does anyone have any points that positions that they haven't yet shared?
I just have one question for you as we're moving forward towards something. Whatever it is we decide now is we're going to put onto the principals to make it happen in their buildings,
Mhm.
even though there might be, every other building has been managed where they aren't running into the same.
Yes. Because because the people that I've been hearing from, and maybe the rest of you have also been hearing from, they're not limited to Shaftesbury. They're from the schools in our district saying, hey, I think it should be done, but it shouldn't be mandatory. And it should be a way that kids can not have to be singled out. That's a pretty consistent message across.
And if we're having a hard time, the principal should report back to us and say, look, we're having XYZ issues around the buses run late every day.
Sure.
And then we have to readapt this policy.
So they can easily, like, if this is a practice, they can easily, like, this could potentially
You can
come up to
modify.
talk, to
Yeah.
like next month.
We'd have the principal who's leading anyway, do the collective chat.
It's done through the video.
Not sure if you want to hear from me.
So where are we right now? I mean, you heard what I proposed. I don't know that I've heard it. Well, Glenn, the American tradition be upheld exactly the way it is. I think maybe Sandy would be on board with that time. I would entertain some kind of motion to adopt some kind of practice.
I mean, I think what's on the table now is having a consistent space where the people who want to participate can participate. We're talking, some teachers might not want to participate, and then those kids.
During the school day. During the school day. If, and I don't mean this 8:25 in the Shasberry example, but from the 8 to 8:25 window.
25.
I think-
Oh, you're talking about 8 in the morning. You
Yeah.
mean or
I'm
don't
just
mean
thinking
that?
in the morning.
I think, as close to the, whatever the official start, which is Shasberry at 8:30.
Well, I wouldn't want to be like, this, like Chris was saying, I wouldn't want to pinpoint it, but somewhere.
Well, 5 minutes before the official start of school.
I don't even want to go there because
No.
I don't know that that's necessarily would work for each of our schools.
Right.
I think it's up to each individual school to have it 5 minutes
So
before
I guess,
the official start.
let's well back up. I think, let's break it down into two things, are we going to look at a space where they can go? Yeah, I think that's the first question. Are we gonna have a unified space where the kids go every day? I think that's the first question.
Sure.
If we can't agree on that part of it, then it's a moot point talking about the rest of it.
To that point, I would ask for some staff input here as well, because we're gonna need people to staff it, and
Both
that,
pieces.
that takes away from a classroom staffing situation or a support position person not being at a certain post. I mean, not trying to make arguments against, but they need to be considered. So I think, trying to wrap ourselves around this in one night, we're doing everybody a disservice.
So I think,
So can we get the input from,
I think what we're looking at now is having a consistent, I don't speak for myself, having a one location where you participate with the pledge. If the staff believes they can do in that building, then we'll make that location for the time to be adjusted by.
But are you saying the morning window? Like, that's why I just wanted to clarify, were you talking about, is that?
I was
Between that
thinking
age.
that morning window, because don't kids come in for breakfast?
Yeah.
During that time, and so there are people coming in, but close to the start time.
I think what's hard is I'm thinking through logistics too for doing it prior to school hours. So I logistically have two children that start school literally at the same time. So one, I have the option of dropping off early, and then the other one gets dropped off like 5 minutes at most before the bell rings and has to like walk in. So gets there basically as the bell is ringing, because that's what logistics allows for. So if I really want my child to say the pledge and I didn't have the logistic ability to do that because it was before the start of the school day, then I would be one of those families that would be missing out. So I think shifting it to like few minutes into the start of the school day, I know it's a little disruptive maybe or harder to navigate, but making sure that everybody gets the equal opportunity because it's there during the school day. And I don't know how to again, it's the logistics. It's just thinking about the families that might be put in a situation of dropping off multiple kids in multiple places and not being able to get them there ahead of time. If it's really important to them, they might miss out.
I mean, would it be possible to have, we have committees, like to have the teachers in the school come up with what they believe would be their best practice for their school? Yeah, that they're going to a common space.
Well, the one thing that makes me wonder about the common space is the number of people in that space. And if I think of the larger schools and the number of children they have in that space, it's back to that logistics piece.
If we look at a school like I used Benel, I think they have about 260 students approximately. You know, if 220 of them were to go to the, what every school refers to as their cafetorium, because it's just auditorium and your gymnasium, that's a lot of kids.
But they do school
But they
assemblies
do
there
that, yeah,
anyways.
they do that.
They do it for school assemblies. How many teachers are there and how many support staff are with them to keep good order?
Can I offer a
Yeah.
suggestion? You could vote this as a draft. That then we can come back with feedback from the principals once they've seen this draft of what the proposal is. And
I sure like that.
But if it is in draft form, does that mean that they would?
it means you're gonna vote on it again once you get your.
They could initiate it and try it to see
but they-
where it worked and where it didn't?
My suggestion is you gotta make a decision. So if this is your decision, then the principals can weigh in that this, on what this may look like in the building. Where right now, they don't know what is proposed. So
We could
give them a draft proposal that then you vote on next month, that you, once you have their input on the logistics of how this works in their building.
Yeah, per se, question, can we, under that framework, allow them to workshop it? So they're not just like doing this in a theoretical landscape, but they've tried it for a month and they say, look, I thought this would be amazing here, and it completely pooped the bed, right? I mean, does that give them that capacity to do that?
That would work.
So what I'd like to do, if we, and I very much like that idea, because it incorporates a lot of what we're talking about in terms of us kind of just guessing how this would work, so it allows us to put the practice. What I would like though is for the principals to be able to come back and share that information with us anonymously. And the reason why I say anonymously is because the principals have loads more to be dealing with than just how the pledge is going to be recited in their schools, loads more. And I've seen how much of Principal Johnson's time has been taken up by this, which is not to say that this isn't important, but it's far from the only thing that a principal has to deal with. So in order to get as honest feedback as possible, I would like it to be anonymous. So that principals don't feel like they have to also answer to constituents about what's going to work or the logistics in their schools. Before I ask for a motion, anyone have any objection to us passing this in draft form and doing exactly as the superintendent put out there? Supposed to put the cart before the horse. Let me ask this. Would anyone like to make a motion that we approve what I outlined at the beginning in draft form to be given to our building principals to allow them to give us feedback or a final decision has been made?
But your draft form, I think, had before the school. Outside the school.
Okay.
And I would like to.
Not outside the school,
Outside
outside class.
outside
Class time.
Which is the
Class
school day.
time.
It is part of the school day. It's just before class time.
And again, beginning of class is a phrase that is already used in our other document. So that's not being made up. Like it is defined specifically.
So it's referring to again, to use the Shasbury, the 8 to 8:30 window, I think is when.
No, so the beginning of class is when butts need to be in seats.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying the opportunity for this moment
Yes.
is being, as written, is the 8 to 8:30 window in the Shasbury.
Yes.
So that example.
I'm just trying to clarify too, I think we're missing words here around like this definition of before like class. If school academic seat time and they're expected to be in their seat at 7:45 a.m. to start school, which is like Woodford's time. You're saying it would be before that 7:45.
Yes. In this draft that I'm hoping we can.
But children are not required to be there till 7:45, so it would happen before.
Yep.
it would be marked.
So it's whatever the time you do, Mark. Trudy, because my kid walked into Shasbury at 7:29 and she's in late, or 8:20.
Yeah.
Right, and that's
But it doesn't mean that Woodford has to do it because if they're early, it doesn't mean they do it 7:45. They could, as the school say, let's try the morning, let's try the afternoon and see what works.
That's not what he's saying.
Yeah, so
That's not what
now
he's
is before the beginning.
that's
Because Jeff, really, I mean, I see your point for sure, but maybe we like prove this in draft form and see what it looks like.
Let's prove it, John.
Yeah.
Can we reduce the language in the draft form?
Sure, we make a suggestion.
Okay. Bring it down to a draft regarding the Pledge of Allegiance in the UESD Elementary School District. Will take the following 4.
Yep, and those 4 points.
No,
No, not the 4 points.
none
Okay.
of the 4.
Okay.
Have it start like that let's get educated. Let's hear from our building principals. Let's hear how we can make this
What
work.
didn't, what's the four, what are the four? The four,
Well, so, but I think,
Well, I'm saying don't put anything.
Okay.
Except other than we want to have a.
We've had those discussions and they're looking for guidance from.
yeah. So I think we need to give them something to try, as opposed to asking what they'd like to try. So I would entertain a motion that we adopt the following draft practice. Shortly before the beginning of class, the school principal or their designee will lead students and staff in a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance at some common area on school grounds. 2, participation in this recitation is voluntary for all. 3, all students and staff members, whether or not they participate in the recitation of the pledge, are to be in their appropriate spaces within the school building by the start of class, as defined in our handbook. And 4, principals will notify families of the exact time and place the pledge will occur and should keep these consistent throughout the school year to the greatest extent possible. I would like a motion to approve that in draft form to begin work.
Can we just change instead of one common area, common area or areas?
Sure.
Because it could be in Shasta,
Yep.
additional Shasta's layout, you know, it could be.
And that could
I didn't get it
avoid putting
wrong.
200 people in one.
Five
Right.
and six, like they had this library with all these classroom rounds, so they could do it in the library there.
Yep.
But then you have the kids can go to the
I
cafeteria.
like the
The
job. Yeah.
parenthetical S.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that change.
We'll put it in there.
So, I'll take that as a motion.
I'll make that a
Jeff just made it. You want to second it? Okay, Ricardo, we got a second. So first, second, any further discussion on putting this out there as a draft for our principals with the understanding we're going to return to this in December?
I would like to hear logistically how it went. I would like to know what the challenges were.
Mhm.
I would also like to know what the successes were as well. And any other suggestions they may have
Right on.
prior to our next meeting.
And this is discussion, so I'm just like spitballing out loud. So shoot me down if this doesn't make sense. Can we make the principal reporting both required and anonymous? Just so that we
Yeah.
know that we're hearing from
Yes.
everyone, you know, and not just.
Oh,
and
I would
not-
like to, yes.
Can we do a survey?
I was gonna say,
I don't want to get in the minutia. If we're going to get feedback. I don't want to micromanage that.
But just so we get all of their perspectives and feel comfortable with whatever decision we're
Yeah,
gonna make.
for sure.
the other thing I would ask is, you know, we have the teachers and the teachers union. You want to be respectful of the teachers in this building. Do we give them a voice in how they think this coming out? Because, you know, they're working with a contract.
Guess what? Right behind the teachers unions is, educational support professionals
Yep.
union is likely gonna be tasked with
I know.
running this. So, yeah, I think. we should
I imagine that comes from the principal, right? Like that they'll be talking to them over the course of the month or no?
You hope they always see eye to eye. but they don't.
So here's my take on that specifically.
Yeah.
So with the caveat that I think I've earned my pro worker bones a long time ago, having been a union steward for the last 25 years for the State of Vermont Employee Association, having walked the picket lines where I first met Donna Cawley. I don't know that we can get input from every single person who has skin in this game. I think we need to simply go to the leaders of our schools.
So we'll go
And
to
ask
ask
for
for the
that.
school, then if the teachers have an issue, they'll follow up with their union and
Yep.
report back.
Like with that, as they should, right? That's one of the,
So
one of the-
they
it's one of the places-
grieve any issues.
Yep.
they have.
And also they're welcome at public comment and then
For sure.
they felt like they have not been heard.
100%.
Right.
So we got a first and a second. Any further discussion on this?
I struggle a little bit with the start of the school day. Or prior to the start of the school day. I'm willing to see how it will play out, obviously, but I think that it's important. I guess I wonder if that wording has to be in there, because is there, again, flexibility for the principals to try out? Like, if they say, 7:55 isn't gonna work, I want to do 8 o'clock for some reason, like, I guess, do they have the flexibility to allow for that? In trying to figure out if this draft is going to work, to determine if start of the school day is 5 minutes earlier, and maybe 5 minutes doesn't matter to them, but I'm just wondering if we give them the flexibility. And I don't know, is there like options for them to say, like, we want to do it at lunchtime instead, like you mentioned, like maybe, 2 grades are in the lunchroom and that's the opportunity. I don't know how they do it, what the logistics looks like, but like, does the time need to be controlled?
So I don't know how having it occur after students have to be in there doesn't present us with a situation where students have to opt out, and we're creating a situation where they're having to exclude themselves from something that is happening, that they have to be a part, they have to be present for.
Well, if I understand you correctly, you're just looking to give principals other options in case the first thing didn't happen?
Because I was wondering if there's more, right, like if for some reason, or is it, at the start of the school day, rather than going directly to your classroom, like some kids probably come in at late anyways for whatever, reason, like can they take the first 2 minutes to do this and then settle into the classroom versus, I don't know, I just.
I mean,
the way the-
For the principals and the schools.
I mean, the way that the motion is framed right now, it would not be, and I think what we need to do is see if it works now, and we'll get the feedback, we'll get the honest feedback one way or the other, and then we'll figure out what we need to
And
do.
if folks vote yes for this trial period, for you, for example, come back and it can be a no.
Oh, yeah.
Next time and this stops.
Right.
Yeah, by virtue of it being a draft, this is not
So
finalized. now.
one thing I'd request, I guess, from the principals is, I'm hearing Woodford, which is it'd be easier to call, like how many kids would opt out? And, it might have to be, they might say it's more than one.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give a hard number, 18 kids that Woodford opted out, but it might just be, is it more than one? Yes or no? And just to make it, because if it's 0 in the school, then
Maybe there's not.
and maybe it's another, we had to amend it.
Then it's 0 this year.
This
That's all we know.
Yeah.
We don't know what next year's. Yeah, it's 0 today.
Forgot.
We forgot about it. So, I feel like we're close to having something. So any further discussion, any further new discussion on the thing with the draft that's on the floor right now? Okay. All those in favor of approving what I just read in draft form with the understanding we will come back next month after having input, anonymous but mandatory input from our building administrators. Please say aye. I think I got it all. Please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
We don't have 7 people here. We okay. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, well, so I swear to God, people should go look this up. Under Robert's Rules of Order, abstentions go to the majority, so that motion passes. So we will come back. I'll ask the superintendent to bring this to our building principals before the December meeting.
Mhm.
So 3 people voted in favor. Nobody voted against.
Got it.
3 people abstained. Abstentions go to the majority. No votes, which we didn't have because all 6 of the voted don't count toward anything. So 4 against with the majority, don't count me. Those are the 4 options. So Superintendent Culkeen, it's true, look it up. Superintendent Culkeen, if you would please direct the building principals to the draft practice
Absolutely.
and let them know we need.
I did share it with them, this afternoon when you shared.
Okay. Holy smokes, that's how the sausage is made. Item number 10, FYI. That's the FYI we talked about, which has the budget status report. It has new administrative regulations regarding adopted policy 5140, which regards communicable diseases. The academic spring SVUESD results, which has to do with in-school behavior, student enrollments, and finally, the K-12 civics and history overview, which I hope take a look at.
One thing,
Yes.
as spring results, I don't believe has 6th grade. Now,
Yeah, no, and it doesn't have half of 5th grade even, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
it just goes to math and not the.
so have results.
One dog.
Might just be the principal.
Okay.
It's gonna be different.
So.
I know. Yeah.
Yes, it was not in here.
It doesn't start tomorrow morning.
So where did I find it? It was on the web page. And it definitely displayed differently. Okay, so hey, we're not done yet, actually. So we've exhausted our agenda. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
I have a question. What does Shasberry do tomorrow morning?
So the superintendent is going to advise that the superintendent is going to tell the principals. I don't know what the short term is going to.
Shasbury tomorrow morning will be doing what they did this morning.
Yeah,
I brought 7:55 in the morning to close.
I'm not,
Whatever we couldn't do for.
whatever you have been doing, yeah, we'll continue until.
So I can't go back to what we were doing in September.
You need to do what you're going to do.
I am a mixed soldier.
Yeah.
I need to know what we need to do.
Yeah, and it'll be exactly, every school will do what they did this, as superintendent said, everything they did this morning, they'll do tomorrow morning. Superintendent needs obviously the time to talk to the building administrators, and we'll put this into action. We'll see how it works.
Do we control this, or is there like, in Jim's conversation with them, is there a target date to get back to the?
I think as long as we hear before.
No, I mean, to get to them in terms of what this workshop
Like
month
we're
is gonna
right
be.
now.
Oh, yeah, no, my hope is it happens. I mean, we did this
So-
week,
so-
it's gonna happen soon. We're gonna have like.
Your meeting's until December
This
2nd.
meeting's still going on.
Yeah, this meeting.
So this meeting, yeah, we have not yet adjourned yet.
We should stop this discussion.
We should, yeah, that's a good point, Jeff, because we're
is-
now straying from our
The
agenda.
board
Yep.
point,
Yeah.
you know, as the principals will tell their staff.
Yep.
How to proceed.
So right away.
Hopefully tomorrow, within this week.
Thank you.
And then we'll base it there.
So folks, we need Stephanie, you had something else? Is it?
No, I was just trying to grab your attention. I didn't know.
Oh, thank you.
what She had, and if that needed to be on.
So I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
Next motion.
Thanks, Jeff. Do we have a second? All right. Who wants it first?